Welcome to Coding in the Cinema. Today I'm discussing 3 films from the Criterion Collection that didn't necessarily do that well at the box office, but later on, over time, they become true classics and shown the beauty and the strength of the films. These are great films that I encourage you to own if you don't already. And you may have heard of this first one from David Lynch, a real masterpiece that is as difficult and perplexing as it is amazing, Mulholland Drive. Blonde Betty Elms, Naomi Watts, in a real good performance, has only just arrived in Hollywood to become a movie star, and she meets Laura Herring's character, who has amnesia, who's just come out of a car wreck. And so some of this movie is trying to put together Laura Herring's character and figure out what happened with her. There's also this filmmaker that seems to make no sense at first, who's trying to get a film made, and David Lynch combines all 3 of these stories and more into this sort of representation of a nightmare. And it's just a really satisfying film visually with a lot of little clues and tidbits and things that make it a great rewatch. I'm sure on physical media here I have just the Blu-ray version. There are lots of different collections of this out there. And this film really surprised me how much I enjoyed it for what it was. And Naomi Watts' acting at first seems a little strange because she almost sounds like an actress trying to be an actress, but that makes sense later. This has some of the best scenes with romantic chemistry in any film I've seen anywhere. And I really like the satire and all the different takes that this has on Hollywood, as well as the nightmarish elements. This film is truly something special. And maybe, I don't know if this is like the first place you would start with David Lynch, but over time, as I've thought about it, I've really enjoyed it. And I can see why it didn't do as well in the box office, because it is kind of a confounding movie, and it's purposefully challenging. So I wanted to talk a little bit to you about Mulholland Drive as my first choice. And my second choice is an older film that I've long been a fan of, and I'm going to talk about on my channel any time that I can. This will be a great film for you if you're in that Halloween spirit, that kind of creepy, moody horror spirit. This is called The Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum, and one of the great performances of an actor at all time. The Night of the Hunter, incredibly, the only film Charles Laughton ever directed, which is a real shame, is a standalone masterpiece, a horror movie with qualities of a grim fairy tale, with a sublimely sinister Robert Mitchum as a traveling preacher named Harry Powell, who really befriends the community and becomes this well-known preacher, well-liked preacher. And this film is so famous that Spike Lee referred to it in Do the Right Thing with the love-hate knuckles, if you'll remember that. And this preacher is pure evil, and he manipulates this family because he wants some money that he's found out about in a prison, and that family has access to it. This uses terrific black and white shadows, lots of great stuff in here, claustrophobic scenes with Shelley Winters. And this movie is something that I just don't think America has ever been ready for, because it forces you to face the reality that not all people of faith have good intentions, and some of them are nothing more than slimy, gross grifters. And I don't think this movie has aged a day. And it's really, I think, was tough for people to accept back then that, like, you know, a religious figure might be that corrupt. And it has long gone on to be one of the best films of the black and white horror drama genre. Definitely see it. They talk about the prison in Moundsville where he was, and every time now I think about going to Moundsville in West Virginia, which is a cool site to visit. It always makes me think of this film, and so I want to go back there. And oh man, I love it so much. But another film, and I think this film was sort of a victim of Star Wars, a victim of its own name, Sorcerer. It really never, like, this thing just wasn't advertised correctly, I don't think, and I think it was kind of difficult for people to latch on to what it was actually trying to do. So this is a hallucinatory journey into the heart of darkness, and it's a loose remake of Wages of Fear, which I like even a little better, and I did a video where I compared these two. But basically, there's this remote Latin American village, and there are these fugitives. Roy Scheider plays, from Jaws, he plays a gangster. There's an assassin, a businessman, and a terrorist, who you see why his terrorist activities were in the very beginning, and they've got to transport these 2 trucks full of explosive nitroglycerin through the jungle. This film builds so much tension and suspense, and there is a scene in here, and I talked about this in my video when I compared this to Wages of Fear, where the truck, and it's kind of what the cover's referring to, is trying to get through this rickety bridge. And I mean, I think any film student anywhere should be watching that scene in this whole movie, in fact, because of how much suspense it builds on that bridge. Just a terrific use of environment to, like I said, to set up suspense and to really draw us into a world that is greasy and slimy and terrifying, and these characters are, I don't think I didn't like them as much as the characters in The Wages of Fear, but what comes out here is a really tight, fun thriller that you should see that I think was forgotten at the time, and like I said, didn't do as well in the box office, which is a real shame because it's a great film. So, recap the 3 films: Mulholland Drive, The Night of the Hunter, and The Sorcerer. See, it sounds, when I first heard about Sorcerer, I thought it was like an 80s swords and shields kind of thing, but it's not. It's about trying to haul some dangerous chemicals. If you like the video today, you want to click the thumbs up button for me. Tell me your thoughts on a box office failure that I've not put in my 3 here, because I'd kind of like to look at those as sort of a fun little thing I enjoy doing. Subscribe if you haven't to Cody in the Cinema.